Well, hello, good morning. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning political news show for Indiana. Our opening theme is by Hoosier singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss, and my name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. This week, nearly 6 months of ill-advised and illegal war have the economy hanging by a thread. Trump hides corruption behind scandal. A huge slate of primary elections, and both major parties struggle to find a way forward. All of that and more. But before we begin, you know the drill. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, and it is a lot of work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that's okay. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding our content to your people. Get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. Follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Now, let's welcome this week's guest. First, a newcomer to the show. She's a licensed clinical social worker, a special education advocate, and a progressive rabble-rouser. It's Erin Moonwalker. Erin, good morning.
Good morning.
So glad to have you here with us in the Who's Left universe for the first time.
I am so glad to be here. This is such a treat. Thank you.
I've been waiting to do one of these with you for a long time. You always have the spiciest takes on social media, so we're gonna have a nice spicy brunch this morning, as it were. Glad to have you here. Let us welcome our next guest at this time, and we met him on the podcast back in January, but it's his first time joining us on the Sunday show. He's the Democratic nominee for State House District 38, which includes all of Carroll and Tipton and portions of Cass, Clinton, Howard, and Tippecanoe counties. It's Nate Stout. Nate, welcome.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Fantastic. Glad to have you here with us on this lovely Sunday morning.
Yes, it's a beautiful day. Yesterday, it was kind of a scorcher. I was out at a Renaissance fair in Cass County, one of the 6 that you mentioned there. And it was a great day talking to voters, and I'm excited to go through all of our topics today.
A Ren Fair. Huzzah!
Yes, huzzah.
Fantastic. Well, let us go ahead and jump into the deep end here. We've got a lot to talk about this morning, and we'll as long as the U.S. finds itself involved in war, that's probably as good a place to start as any. Last week, we were concerned the conflict was widening, and multiple fronts were converging into a larger war. Now, this week, however, has largely been defined by a lack of fighting involving U.S. forces as regional players engaged in negotiations. Iran and Oman haggled over a plan to control traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, which would give the former control over incoming ship traffic, with the latter overseeing outbound movement, and could see fees imposed. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan signed a mutual defense pact in the holy city of Mecca, committing each country to treat an attack on one as an attack on all. Israel and Lebanon held discussions in Rome, agreeing to a short list of countries that could send troops to verify Hezbollah's disarmament under their U.S. brokered agreement. Now, that's not to say the week was entirely peaceful. Israel continued to carry out limited strikes in Gaza and southern Lebanon, and Yemen is on the brink of falling back into a state of civil war as Iranian-backed Houthi rebels continued to attack shipping off the country's coast, and this week launched a series of strikes on forces belonging to Yemen's internationally recognized government. As for U.S. forces in the region, the Washington Post reported the Pentagon is running dangerously low on important munitions, and President Trump confronted Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth over the shortage last weekend at Camp David. Reuters followed up midweek with the details, reporting the U.S. has used virtually all of its global ATACMS and precision strike missile stockpile during the Iran war. The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates about 65% of Patriot interceptors have been expended, and THAAD interceptors are down at least 38%. The U.S. has also burned through nearly half of its global Tomahawk cruise missile supply. Erin, what the hell have we been spending $1 trillion a year on?
That's a great question. It's certainly not the American public. When I think the context that I look at the war in Iran through is through my local community. I think people forget, Hoosiers forget, that there are Iranians living in Indiana, Iranian Hoosiers who still have ties to the country. They live in my community. I live in West Lafayette, right by Purdue. And so for them, this may mean just getting radio silence from their family members after a strike, not knowing if their family members were killed, displaced, or just without power or phone service. Very agonizing for them. I'm attuned to them. I try to stay attuned to them when I read these headlines. Or it may mean financial insecurity and not being able to return home or not being able to continue their academic program if they go to Purdue. Or just feeling unsafe walking around Indiana because of the way this war increases anti-Arab racism and anti-Arab sentiment. So the headlines are concerning. I am concerned that we are headed toward world war, and not only would we be entering into that, and that alone is scary, but the fact that we would be on the Axis side and not the Allies side this time around, horrifying. But then, we think about, we don't have a lot of power over what's going on globally, but we do have power over things going on locally and even within our own party. And what concerns me is that, this is not just Trump's war. This is also Evan Bayh's war, his organization Marathon Oil's war. He joined Marathon's board in 2011, right out of the Senate. And that same year, he's going on Fox News pleading the case for the U.S. to get in and protect Israel. And Marathon, like other oil companies, got consulted before we invaded Venezuela. And, Evan Bayh is sitting on Biden's Intelligence Advisory Council. He has some inside information into all of this. And then Marathon's profits for the second quarter of 2025, only $3.3 billion. For the second quarter of 2026, about $8.5 billion, more than double. So we want to think about who's benefiting from all of this conflict. It's not just Netanyahu, right? It's not just Trump's ego. It's also the corporate state and even people within our own party that we really need to, I think, work harder holding accountable.
Oh, it's a big club and we ain't in it. Nate, I want to get your take. Erin mentioned world war and being on the wrong side of these things. And Saudi Arabia and Turkey and Pakistan entered this sort of mutual defense treaty this week. Now, Turkey is a NATO member. There's sort of a nexus in this thing. Could the U.S. find itself having to jump into a war involving one of these three countries? I mean, what happens if Pakistan and India get into it, and then Turkey has to go to their aid and they get involved? I feel like, if we know our history and we know these alliances before World War I and then again before World War II, sort of wound up dragging everybody in because they had these mutual defense pacts.
Well, a lot was said in the last couple of minutes, and I think what I'd like to go back to is that I think people are looking for leadership. And the United States could easily take a different position and start leading in the charge for peace instead of reopening this war, closing and opening the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, the disruption that it's having, and I know that we were just talking about corporations, but, our economy is an intricate web of suppliers and people. And ever since Trump's tariff war began, it has been difficult for small businesses to compete. Because while large corporations can weather the storm of slowed down POs and people making choices based off of availability, it's killing small business. So we have to, and we're talking about our party, and I agree, our party needs to focus on some common enemies. For example, Erin mentioned, the sentiment for Muslims and how that's happened in this state. And I'd like to talk about that, but I don't want to keep rambling. But I think, to summarize, the United States needs to take a position of leadership, and we got to do something about Trump. He's completely off the rails, and we see it every week. I mean, we see him on the TV every day, just spouting nonsense. So hopefully calmer heads will prevail, and we can start putting all of this in the rear view, because we're going to have to rebuild the Middle East just like we've done my entire life, really.
Yeah, but why do we have to keep rebuilding the Middle East? Like,
because we keep blowing it up.
Knocked it over.
That's right. I know. That's another thing. My daughter just graduated. She graduated last year, and she was friends with a guy who's a Marine. And imagine being like, I don't know where we lost our empathy. I thought Vietnam taught us the lessons that we needed to learn about war, and yet we're putting our young men and women in the same position, generations later. Like, what are we doing?
That's a theme we talk about frequently on here, is how we always tend to forget the lessons of the past. And it seems like clockwork every 4 generations, as the generation that learned those lessons passes on, the next generation has to relearn these things. But, Vietnam was only a couple generations ago. Erin, you got the itch.
Yes, I got an itch. So I'm thinking about, what we learned from Vietnam and just how we've all been propagandized, and all the unlearning I've had to do about Israel and their role in this conflict. And I'm just like, I completely agree with you, Nate, that we need to demonstrate better leadership, but I have so much concern about how we're going to do that when we're not even supporting the ICC, and Israel's going after the ICC and undermining them, at every turn. I am hopeful that maybe if we get some progressive, some anti-APAC candidates into the House and Senate, we can finally prop them up, or at least give some resistance to this blank check that we're giving Bibi. But yeah, I'd love to know if you have any, thoughts about how we go about doing that, other than just trying to fill the House and the Senate.
I mean, I think just like with anything. Oh, go ahead. You go.
Well, I was going to say, Nate hinted at it. He talked about the going after the real enemies, and that is the billionaires and trillionaires, right?
Yes.
I mean, my whole approach when I talk to voters as a candidate is to put everything in the lens of our local communities. How can we redirect? Because all of these things that we just talked about are systemic because we let it happen. We let our communities look like every other community when you drive across the Midwest. I was talking about this the other day. We've had economic policy in Indiana that is basically just let the government make these deals with corporations and franchises, and just we get what we get. It's not what we want. No one's coming to ask us what we want. So all of this stuff, and I was in. I want to talk about the Hoosier Hospitality Rally. I don't know if that's on the list at some point, but all of this stuff, we have to put it in a lens of what we can do right around us. Because I'm a business guy, and in sales, as cheesy as it is you have to focus on what you can control and let everything else go. And what we can control is our behaviors and our interactions with our neighbors. And it's got to start here because, and I love social media. I get kind of, I'm on there a lot because I think it's a great medium, but like nothing replaces a direct conversation with someone at a county fair or at a, or a Ren fair even.
Yeah, and social media was so much better when it was like unmediated and there was no algorithms. Do you guys remember when like Facebook was just chronological and only the people you followed? Oh man, those were the good old days. I sound like an old guy now. But let's move on. And I want to bring it local, like you were talking about, Nate. And I always like to bring the discussion of what's going on over there to how it affects us here at home. And for much of the country, that has come in the form of higher prices for gasoline, for diesel, and for all the things it takes to fuel transport. So, basically everything. But here in Indiana, Governor Mike Braun has used his emergency powers to pause the state's gas and excise taxes, saving Hoosiers about 60 cents a gallon at the pump, but costing the state's coffers $140 million a month to cover the difference. Now, state law says the governor can only exercise this power for 60 days without calling a special session of the state legislature, but he's managed to push that to 120 days with a more generous reading of the law, and this week cited a new energy emergency to extend the tax holiday once again. This time, Braun citing global oil shipping disruptions from the Ukraine conflict and Canadian wildfires, a separate legal basis than the Iran war emergency. Nate, listen, this seems dubious. The Ukraine conflict and Canadian wildfires have not caused new supply disruptions. This is legal trickery with an okay from the Attorney General on top of the statutory stretch that got us to this point in the first place. But, who's going to argue for higher gas prices going into an election?
I mean, it's laughable at this point. I mean, of course, what a concept, using the power of the government for the good of the people. I don't know. It's so convenient, and it's always directed at something that won't alienate him from his pals in Washington. And that's all this is. The candidate that I'm running against, he's been to DC several times. He is a board member of ALEC. He's our state representative for ALEC, which basically feeds all the legislation in Washington. And that's how we get data centers in our backyard with nobody knowing. And it's just the same old recipe. But as long as they blame someone else and they've associated Democrats with remember how we were so terrible for giving Ukraine all that aid? It's politics at its finest.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, listen, Trump's war in Iran isn't the only terrible choice hitting Hoosiers square in the wallet. The Department of Energy has mandated that 2 outdated, set-to-shutter, money-losing coal-burning power plants must remain in operation under emergency order since last December. Now, NIPSCO, the utility monopoly in the northern portion of the state, wants to charge customers $38 million to cover their losses, with a $2.8 million profit baked in for the company, as a treat. They await the inevitable okay from the feds on that hike, but they didn't get their wish granted by the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission this week. The IURC rejecting NIPSCO's $741 million 5-year gas infrastructure plan, ruling the utility failed to justify the costs. The vote was 3-0. The commission down 2 members after Governor Braun fired Andy Zay on Monday. He had demoted Zay from the chairman's position just 6 weeks ago after appointing him only back in December, and this after the IURC approved a rate hike for AES, the utility serving Indianapolis. He alleges Zay violated multiple state policies, including failing to file a required financial disclosure, improperly awarding payments and personal gifts to employees, and directing staff to alter a public meeting agenda. Braun chose Indianapolis City County Councilor Joshua Bain to fill the seat on Thursday. Erin, Democratic Party Chair Karen Talion says, quote, Braun is using Zay as a scapegoat and blames the state's exploding utility rates on the governor. Is she right?
Yeah, I agree with her. And this is a place that we agree. But I think it kind of misses the bigger picture that utilities should be publicly owned. There's something we all need. We should all have more local control over how they're operated. We shouldn't be paying CEOs millions of dollars to deliver us services we need. I mean, a lot of these lines are going in or under or around our houses. Also, I found this out. I didn't know this. One of the first municipally owned public utilities or utility organizations was in Wabash, Indiana, back in like 1880.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, it remained publicly owned until they let it get privatized. They sold it off to a company. So deprivatizing or finding some way to establish public ownership over utilities, especially now during this energy crisis that we're facing, I think is doable. We've done it before. It's not some radical idea.
Yeah, and listen, while we're on the subject of Indiana's out-of-balance economy, a new report from Prosperity Indiana this week shows wages in the state continue to lag behind the cost of housing. Indiana renters now need to earn about $24 an hour to comfortably afford a two-bedroom apartment, while the average renter's wage sits around $19 an hour, a $5 an hour gap that's only widened since the group's 2023 report. So someone earning Indiana's $7.25 minimum wage would need to work 3.3 full-time jobs to afford a market-rate two-bedroom apartment. The average Hoosier renter household has about $7,700 less annual purchasing power than 3 years ago, as rents have risen faster than wages, and the report found 14 of the 20 most common jobs in Indiana don't pay a sufficient hourly wage to cover that rent. The affordability gap spans the whole state, though it's worse near urban areas. Nearly 30% of Hoosiers rent. Now, Erin, did a little bit of back of the napkin math. 3.3 full-time jobs at 40 hours a week is 132 hours out of 168 hours in a week. That leaves 5 hours a day for sleep if you do nothing else but work.
Yeah, that's impossible, right? It's impossible. It's not doable. But also, so I live in West Lafayette, right by Purdue. And it's a big, it's becoming fairly touristy, right? Because we have football games and basketball games that people travel out of state for. And I have Airbnbs all over my neighborhood. I've lived here since 1984. It used to be like a sleepy little neighborhood full of professors, innocent little ag professors and math professors. And now we have Airbnbs. We also have corporate owned housing. We have property management companies that are buying up all the properties. And that alone is something that could be better regulated by our state. And our state is just doing nothing about it.
Well, about that, Nate, obviously, at least to me, the unregulated free market is obviously not working for a great number of Hoosiers. So when you get to the State House after winning in November, what are you and your colleagues going to do about it?
Well, I say this all the time, but government is an open book test. We have neighbors to the west and to the east and to the north that have all done things differently in terms of energy policy. We have to harness the facts. There's no such thing as a big, clean, beautiful coal plant or whatever Trump says. And we need to focus on renewable energy. In Illinois, they talk about this community solar, community energy type approach where you're taking some of the burden of utilities, like you're saying, partnering with a local owned utility versus a regulated, that's not regulated, monopoly utility. And I think it's education too, letting people understand why things are the way that they are, why NIPSCO is allowed to charge you more for a delivery fee than the service that you used. It's why we allow them to have CEOs that in total compensation are north of $6 million each. I think it's even more than that. I just don't want to overstate. We got to educate the public on what other people are doing, the results that those are developed. Indiana's smart. We're not a crazy partisan state, but we have not been giving people options. All we've been doing is complaining about what's broken.
So much of what you said there, Nate, we're not this incredibly partisan state. We're not a hopeless red state, as we have been painted. We are, as Destiny Wells once said, a purple state with a turnout problem. We're also a purple state with a gerrymandering problem. But That's neither here nor there. Let's zoom out a little bit. We've been talking about the economy here in Indiana. Let's look at the U.S. economy at large. Now, Friday, excuse me, we got July's jobs numbers, and they're not great, Bob. The U.S. lost 23,000 jobs last month. Economists had expected a gain of 83,000. What's more, prior months were revised down a combined 103,000 jobs, painting a much weaker labor picture than previously reported. Wage growth badly missed too. Hourly earnings rose just 3.2% year over year, the slowest in 5 years, and below the 3.5% inflation growth, meaning real wages are effectively falling. And Trump's deportation agenda is backfiring. An article in the rabid left-wing dirt rag Fortune this week details how native-born Americans aren't replacing immigrant workers. The jobs and support systems tied to that work are just being lost. Healthcare and social assistance sectors with heavy immigrant representation posted their weakest job growth in 3 years in July. At the same time, states like Indiana are cutting Medicaid, meaning families will likely absorb the gap through unpaid caregiving, a burden AARP estimates is already worth $1 trillion annually nationwide, and one carried largely by women. But men suffer too. For every 6 undocumented male workers pushed out of the local labor market, one U.S.-born male worker also lost employment, with construction hit hardest, where less educated native-born men saw employment fall 3%. Roughly 1 in 3 tradespeople in U.S. construction is an immigrant, meaning workforce losses can stall entire projects and reduce demand for other workers on the same job site, not just the immigrant workers directly affected. Now, Nate, I know the World Cup is over, but in soccer, that's what we call an own goal.
Yeah. There was a guy in my hometown that was a volunteer fireman, and they found out later that he was setting fires so that he could go put them out. That's essentially what U.S. policy has been since Trump has been around. So anything he's gotten his hands on, he sets it on fire so that he can look like he's putting it out. Again, the tariff started all of this destabilization in the economy. The workforce problem, and I had a conversation last night about the expense. We're spending over 3 times what we did in previous administrations to deport less people, while also causing all this destabilization in the economy. I don't know how many more examples the American people are going to need to get before we start coalescing, because they give it to us every day.
Every day. Now, Erin, go ahead.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that wrecking the economy, that's an intentional act. Musk made that very clear. His nerdwike bros have made that very clear. If you wreck the economy, you get to reap the benefits if you're in that top 1%. You see that in the stock market. And the people who get this insider information, right, and the little bumps that they give themselves away with. But also, if you wreck the economy, you get to induce authoritarianism, right? You get more control over the government. And I think that is the end goal that we all need to pay attention to and maybe help our community members understand. And I can probably talk about this on and on. So I'll just say that the last point is I don't know how to prepare my community for this. I went to the city council back at the height of the coup, when we thought Social Security was just going to collapse immediately. And I couldn't even get a response from the city council. I offered to set up some kind of programming to educate people about how they could stay afloat if something happens to their Social Security checks. So yeah, how this trickles down to our local community, what our local leaders are doing, I mean, that all still remains very unclear, even though we've seen this all coming. The warnings are not new.
Yeah. Well, and, so on the news of these terrible job numbers and to what you're talking about, Erin, what happened in the stock market when jobs went down, when workers lost their employment? The stock market went up. Major indices jumping to new record highs on Friday, with traders elated as the odds of a rate hike by the Fed next month decreased with the weak jobs report. It's like the stock market isn't the same thing as the economy.
No, and I think that really hurt Biden because they kept saying the economy's doing so great because the stock market was doing so great. And there were other factors too, but regular people weren't feeling it. You know, I didn't have more purchasing power. I know my bills were getting more expensive. And I think leaders have to stop focusing so much on the stock market when they're going to give us a status update.
Nate, final thoughts on the economy here before we turn the page.
Well, there's no doubt it's a K economy. You're seeing that household income, I would say north of 250,000, which there are more of them than there used to be as people have grown. They are continuing to see their portfolios grow. Money makes money, and people forget that. But at some point, that's why we're able to have a trillionaire. He is not creating that value. You know, it's wild to me. Are you guys familiar with the app called Kalshi?
Oh, yeah.
I've always felt that the stock market, because no one could really explain it to me in simple elevator pitch type terms, that it literally was just a little bit of, it's just gambling. It's just like strategic approved gambling. And now Kalshi is a betting app that they're talking, and they use trading language. You can trade futures, and it's a betting app. So that's how I feel about the economy and people paying attention to the stock market. It's for the very well off, because the rest of the economy, they don't have a 401k. They don't have a portfolio. They can't afford a rent. They can't afford rent because it's $900 for a studio apartment in places like Howard County. So the K is real.
Well, it's real, and to your point, Nate, it is. The stock market is gambling, and like gambling in a casino, it is a rigged game, and the house, capital, always wins. So let's move on to our next topic. And, you know, with war in the Middle East and the economy teetering, you'd think the president of the United States would have better things to do, but he largely spent the week on vanity projects, relitigating old losses, and kneecapping vital social programs. So Trump publicly rebuked U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Jeanine Pirro, after her office dropped charges against a former Olympic canoeist accused of vandalizing the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, and admitted in court that the damage was caused by shoddy contractor work, not vandalism. One of his other so-called beautification projects was dealt a blow this week when the Federal Appeals Court, or a Federal Appeals Court, blocked the construction of Trump's ballroom on the former site of the White House East Wing. The majority rejected Trump's national security justification as a blanket shield from judicial review, saying, quote, "Such arguments are not an automatic get-out-of-law free card," while noting the project's roughly $400 million in private funding actually reinforces concern about bypassing congressional oversight. The court stayed their ruling for 2 weeks to let Trump appeal the decision to the Supreme Court, which he says he'll do immediately. That very Supreme Court dealt Trump a couple losses last term, ruling he could not fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook, though Chief Justice John Roberts' majority opinion left the door open for another attempt, which the administration undertook this week, sending a letter demanding she respond to mortgage fraud allegations. Trump is also relitigating his loss on birthright citizenship, signing 2 new executive orders after the Supreme Court struck down his earlier order 6-3. One denies citizenship to children of, quote, alien enemies, foreign government employees, or parents who paid to give birth in the U.S. The other directs the State Department and DHS to deny visas to suspected birth tourists. It's not a thing. And speaking of children, the administration this week moved to deregulate the Head Start preschool program, sending decisions on student-teacher ratios, education requirements, and background checks to the states. Erin, listen, I know that is a lot, but I want to tie this Head Start proposal back to Trump's anti-immigrant economy. They are deporting people who work in childcare. They're gutting the federal preschool program. They want to remove these options, so women have to stay in the home. It's in Project 2025. It is Christian nationalism through and through.
Hashtag trad life. No, my first thought when I read that about Head Start and the background checks is, of course, an administration of pedophiles and pedophile protectors would want to cut funding for background checks for all the children who attend Head Start. You know, it's on brand. But also, it makes it very difficult for me when we take this federal news, you know, as a social worker, and try to have it, you know, trickle down into our local community when these things won't take effect for 6 months to a year. I mean, you would think that would give us time to plan, but if we start warning people now, it's hard to motivate people to act against it. We really have to be careful and strategic with what, you know, the calls to action that we give people. And then there's this, like, as a therapist, I see this like secondary effect of habituation. If you know anything about exposure therapy, you know, when we're dealing with anxiety or phobias or OCD, we try to pre-plan and expose a person to certain stimuli long enough, frequently enough that they get used to them, so that they're no longer afraid of it. And that's actually what's happening with our news, where we hear about something so frequently that we get to the point where it doesn't bother us as much. We don't pay attention to it. We habituate to these really scary things. So the fire hose is working in that regard. And it's been something that I've felt pretty helpless against at times, trying to warn people I'm in community with.
It is the Steve Bannon flood the zone strategy, and Steve Bannon, as sloppy looking as he is a very smart guy and as evil as he is intelligent. Now, Nate, the Lisa Cook firing, the birthright citizenship ruling, the ballroom, the reflecting pool, his history of alleged sexual assault, Donald Trump cannot take no for an answer.
It's kind of a pattern you see there. Look, when the Access Hollywood tape wasn't enough for people to put up a boundary and say that, yeah, that guy is not the right guy to lead the greatest country in the world. If you believe that growing up, like I did, I thought that, you know, that we were the good guys always. And as I've grown up, I've learned that we haven't always been the good guy, but there's always an opportunity to change. And, you know, I am trying to give people an out that have fallen for a lot of his, because he just tells you what he's gonna do as if you're for it, no new wars, and then immediately starts taking over countries, talking about taking over Greenland. I mean, my God, how many more things do people need to break from this? Like, you didn't do this. You know, the people that voted for him, yeah, they certainly put him in power, but they're not in there making the calls on these terrible decisions. As Erin, as a therapist, I mean, when I'm talking to voters, with the exception of people who are, you know, outwardly against me, I'm going to have a more direct conversation. But any tips on how we talk to these people to, like, break this attachment? It's like Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah. I mean,
no,
should I answer that? It's okay.
Yeah.
I think what's really difficult for me to remember, especially since, like, my nervous system is not in a state where I want to connect with people. It's pretty hardened. It's pretty defensive. And so I save a lot of my energy for my clients, for my family. But to that question, I think it's more important to listen to people. And that's actually how we start persuading people, is by listening to them and making them feel heard. And I think Trump did such a great job making people feel heard. We have to match that energy, and we can't do that chasing corporations and chasing the GOP.
Yeah, the strategy of, you know, in business, if your competitor is doing something really well, you don't try to beat them at that. You hit them where they're weak. You do something that they're not good at. So if you work for a company that maybe you're slower at your service than another competitor that's larger, where you market your commitment to quality, and like, it's all in how you phrase discussions. And I think I do believe that listening is key, but you have to be the microphone of what people can't communicate themselves. Like you have to be able to identify those things that they're feeling and say it out loud for them so that they can recognize it and be like, oh yeah, that's kind of what I'm feeling. That's what he did. He stoked the fires of fear, which are easy to do. People, they love that. I don't know. Some people are addicted to that cortisol spike, cortisol maxing, as my kids said. But yeah, I just was curious because at the end of the day, we've got to work right in our backyards, talking to people and pointing out things like, hey, do you believe our lieutenant governor should be calling an entire religion a death cult? Do you think that's okay? And start building some common ground with our neighbors. That's the only chance we have to make an impact at a larger level.
You both said important words, and it's fear, and with so much going on, we're being thrown off balance, and we're being groomed, to Erin's point, for authoritarianism, because when you're afraid, you want daddy to come protect you, right? It's a very childlike emotion. So let's move on, and Sarah Kendzior, one of my favorite authors, wrote that Trump covers up crime with scandal. And, I worry sometimes that as we talk about all of those things that we just talked about and all that attention we have to pay to things like ballrooms and reflecting pools, that we lose sight of the financial crimes. So let us make sure we take some time today to examine those. And, we all know the Donald spends entirely too much time posting on social media, particularly on Truth Social, a site he owns. Now, Trump is selling early access to his posts via something they call Truth API for up to $100,000 a month. The target customer, financial firms. Now, why would anybody pay to receive the president's posts only seconds earlier than the general public? Essentially, insider trading. Trump's comments already move markets, and for this fee, institutional investors could gain an advantage in high-volume automated trading where milliseconds can mean a difference of millions of dollars. Now, multiple Wall Street sources told NPR they're avoiding the product entirely. One called it, quote, insane, and said, quote, in another administration, this would be considered criminal, while none would go on the record for fear of retaliation. Speaking of financial crimes, we learned late last week that Capital One closed over 300 of Trump's business accounts in 2021 after internal analysts flagged financial activity with the characteristics of money laundering. Trump sued the banking giant, accusing him of debanking him for political reasons after the January 6th insurrection. Capital One gave Trump's businesses several months, including extensions to find new banking arrangements, never publicized the closures, and would have kept the whole thing quiet if not for Trump's lawsuit. Trump is pursuing a similar suit against J.P. Morgan Chase, which also closed accounts that they believed posed financial, legal, or reputational risk. Nate, if he wasn't such a litigious prick, the world may never have known.
Again, like these, each one of these sound bites that you just give us it's an overwhelming amount of insanity. And to your point earlier about this, they literally told us that they were going to overwhelm us, to flood the zone. That it was going to be a shock and awe. There's so much to talk about. What do you focus on? And I do use the Trump coin, the Bible, the shoes, the telephone, all of that stuff in conversations, because people love hating on Nancy Pelosi for getting rich by playing the stock market. And he's literally saying this is a quid pro quo. What got him impeached in the Ukraine call, he's doing it with a televised offer. He is doing it right in front of their faces. And they are so loyal, and they're so hurt for a positive male role model in their life that they're clinging to this. They're like, oh God, please let him turn it around. Because if a lot of people have pushed their chips all the way to the middle on this. And if there's any of those guys watching, I just want to let you know, you can let that go today. It's Sunday. I don't know if you pray, I don't know what you do, but this attachment to hatred and absolute insanity of action, you can let go of that. So there's my therapy for today.
Erin, corruption. What's in your wallet?
Actually, I kind of wanted you to stop talking there for a minute, Scott, because you were making me love the banks and sympathize with big banks, because I love the work that they're doing. I mean, they're the only thing putting up guardrails here for this buffoon.
Well, listen, we look at the Epstein stuff, right? And the folks aren't seeing consequences here in our country. The people that are seeing consequences are largely in Europe. If you look at the artist formerly known as Prince Andrew in the UK, they've got France, Norway, people are seeing consequences. They're not seeing consequences for the sexual crimes. They're seeing consequences for their financial crimes. Money always going to take care of money.
I mean, amen to that. That's how our whole government runs in the U.S.
It's the true. Listen, I always come back to it. I listen to Wajahat Ali a lot. He always comes back to it. It's a George Carlin quote, and the man was right on the money when he said it the first time. It's a big club, and we ain't in it. So let's move on. And if you're a serial criminal like Donald Trump, it's important to have a good attorney to keep you out of trouble. Even better, to have your personal defense attorney installed at the top of the Department of Justice. And Trump has been seeking to do just that, nominating Todd Blanche to take over as Attorney General. We learned earlier this week that Blanche, in a private not-for-press call obtained by Politico, told the Christian nationalist group Intercessors for America that his DOJ would work to make Dobbs, the ruling overturning Roe v. Wade, quote, permanent in every single state, promising to go after doctors mailing abortion medications across state lines. The Biden DOJ had ruled doctors couldn't be prosecuted under the 1873 Comstock Act for mailing these pills, since the drugs have legal non-abortion uses. That opinion is now under thorough review by Trump's DOJ. Side note, Trump's nominee to be the new director at the CDC said abortion surveillance is absolutely a critical component of the CDC's work. That's a quote. And said she wants states to stop hiding abortions within emergency services reporting categories. So, Erin, before we even get to Blanche's confirmation vote, what do you think of that?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I am trying to work with my community to get rid of flock cameras, because flock cameras were used to track a woman across state lines after a suspected abortion. I don't think it's going to stop with abortion pills. I think they're going to keep going. I really dread the next state house session, because our state house, I mean, I've had state legislators admit to me that they use something called drip, drip, drip when they write legislation. They take a little bit this year and a little bit next year, and the bills that were proposed, not even the bills that passed, but that were proposed last year, were horrific. So how much worse is it going to get in 2027?
Yeah, not great. So much for freedom, right? But anyway, let's talk about the confirmation vote and onto the Senate, where, a couple of Republicans had been holding up his confirmation. Outgoing Senators Tom Tillis of North Carolina and John Cornyn of Texas blocking Blanche's nomination in committee. First, Tillis demanded Blanche meet with survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking operation. Overseeing the Epstein investigation has been Blanche's purview, and he did so, though the survivors accused Blanche of being dismissive, abrasive, and condescending. But he checked the box, good enough for Tillis. But then there was the matter of the settlement brokered by Blanche between Trump's DOJ and Trump's IRS, including tax immunity for the president, his businesses, and his family, plus a $1.8 billion, quote, anti-weaponization fund earmarked to compensate January 6 rioters and other Trump allies. Well, Cornyn and Tillis agreed to back Blanche's nomination after he issued a written order formally killing the slush fund and clarifying that the tax immunity deal only applies retroactively, not going forward. Democrats argue the deal doesn't actually close the door on compensating January 6 defendants. Senator Adam Schiff noting a separate existing claims process could still allow payouts, and criticized the tax immunity as still vague enough to help Trump avoid millions in previous tax obligations. Still, Blanche's nomination moved to the full Senate, where he could only afford to lose 2 votes, with Mitch McConnell still MIA, and lose 2 votes he did. Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski and the perpetually concerned and electorally vulnerable Susan Collins of Maine announced they would not vote to confirm, but another outgoing senator, Louisiana's Bill Cassidy, already ousted by a Trump-supported challenger with nothing to lose but his soul, threw Blanche a lifeline Friday, announcing he would vote to confirm, which he did at 4:30 a.m. Saturday morning, the full Senate confirming Trump's personal criminal defense attorney under cover of darkness immediately before adjourning for a 5-week recess. Nate, so much for transparency and accountability.
You know, my grandpa used to say nothing good happens after midnight. And it is funny. I don't know if you guys have talked to politicians. They really wear that on their sleeve, that there are times where they're up till 2 a.m. hammering things out. And you know what that means to me? You're ineffective. If that's how you got to do it, you got to get things done at 4 a.m. I mean, you must not be very good at your job. But what's troubling about this is that these guys are trying to make this appeal that they're kind of on the right side of history, but ultimately they're enabling this madness to continue. And until, people get brave, I mean, I have hopes for the Thomas Massey types that they rally around. And I mean, I don't even know if that's a false flag or whatever, a smoke screen, but
yeah, put a pin in Massey. We're going to come back to him.
Okay, good. I mean, I can't cover it all, but yeah, it's, I don't know what else to say about it.
So I don't know if you all saw Bill Cassidy's face right after he voted to confirm him, but if you haven't,
you need, like he wanted to throw up in his mouth.
I mean, I have yet to sell my soul to the devil, but if I do, that's what I will look like. It was a very visceral response. I mean, the incompetence of these people is usually our saving grace. So it worries me that Todd the Toady Blanche seems a little more competent than Bondi. I worry about the damage he's going to do. But yeah, Republicans are saying like he's made efforts to bring down violent crime, tackle illegal immigration, and combat violent cartels and drug trafficking. And that's how he was sold across the line, at least on a superficial level. Who knows what was going on underneath?
What happened to all the caravans?
What's that?
Where are all the caravans? We had all these caravans. They were coming. Have we ever rounded any of them up or taken a picture of one of these?
Yeah, it turns out they were never really a thing. It's like Fox News is great at this. Whenever there's an election, they like to focus on like one guy crawling through the border fence and say invasion, and they rile up the rubes, and it works. It works. It's so disappointing, but Erin, to your point, I mean, Cassidy knew visibly what he was doing was wrong. He cracked a little bit. There were still 49 other senators that went right along with what they were doing, showed no sign of cracking, no sign of remorse. They are all in on Blanche. They are all in on Trump. They are all in on the fascism.
Yeah, psychopaths socializing regular people into sociopaths.
It's yeah, and they're using, to Nate's point, the means of propaganda, these networks, to do what they're doing. I don't always go into these shows with a theme, and they sort of develop as they go through, but we see we're being groomed to welcome the authoritarianism in, and the people who we want to be fighting against it aren't always fighting against it. Sometimes they're fighting against us. We'll come back to that later in the show as well. But listen, along those lines, I guess let's talk about the primaries this week. And several states held important elections. Tuesday, voters in Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, Virginia, and Washington went to the polls. In Virginia, excuse me, no major surprises there, with Democrats nominating establishment candidates in 2 congressional swing districts following the state Supreme Court striking down a voter-approved redistricting plan earlier this year. Out on the other coast, Washington similarly nominated establishment candidates in their open top 2 primaries. Conservative Democrat Representative Marie Gluesenkamp Perez fended off a progressive challenger, while longtime Seattle area Representative Adam Smith easily defeated 3-term city councilor and socialist Kshama Sawant. In Kansas, another moderate, Pastor Adam Hamilton, founder of the nation's largest United Methodist Church, won the state's Democratic Senate primary. However, in the gubernatorial race, progressive populist State Senator Cindy Holscher won the Democratic nomination over establishment pick Ethan Corson, who had the endorsement of 2-term Governor Laura Kelly. Holscher's top issue, opposing data centers. Next door in Missouri, St. Louis area Rep. Wesley Bell handily defeated former Representative Cori Bush in a rematch from 2 years ago. The defining split in that race, support for Israel. Bush, who enjoyed endorsements from Bernie Sanders and Rashida Tlaib, campaigned on cutting off U.S. aid to Israel, while Bell, who had the support of Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, the Congressional Black Caucus, and a ton of AIPAC money, vowed to continue funneling U.S. taxpayers' dollars to the apartheid state. Missouri also voted on a pair of constitutional amendments, both cynically put on the August ballot by Governor Mike Kehoe in an effort to exploit the lower turnout, more Republican-leaning primary electorate. Well, it didn't work. Amendment 4, which would have required citizen-initiated constitutional amendments to win majorities in all 8 congressional districts rather than a simple statewide majority, and Amendment 5, which would have phased out Missouri's personal income tax while raising other sales taxes to offset the lost revenue, both failed, with opposition topping 80% in both cases. Nate, Missourians have used this initiative petition process to pass several constitutional amendments in recent years, including measures to expand Medicaid, legalize medical and recreational marijuana, and overturn Missouri's near-total abortion ban. Why can't we have nice things?
It's simply a matter of education. People don't know things like ranked choice voting exists. They don't understand that referendums don't have to be just about school taxes, that they could be about statewide issues that move us faster. And, the one thing that I'm very optimistic about is, like I said, I've had a lot of conversations with people in rural Indiana. And when people feel like they've been wronged, they usually get pretty upset about it. And I feel like people are reaching that point right now. And so we just got to stay consistent with our message that we're welcoming people to the table, no matter where they came from, because we got to move forward together to have a chance at changing some of these things and giving people a real voice. I mean, my God, let's talk about marijuana. We've been talking about it for a decade, and it could have been on a statewide ballot, majority rules. We could have moved on, but that's not what they want. We do live in a, I believe Indiana Republican leaders, especially the ones that stayed in leadership, we're like a test site for DC strategy. They replicate it and also tweak it to see if it'll work in certain parts of Indiana. Because if they can win Indiana, then, because we're purple, I think that's why we're seeing so much of this crazy leadership. But yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Well, you mentioned it earlier, your opponent being a member of ALEC. And ALEC is this organization where they do things precisely like this. They introduce these test bills in various states. They tweak them here, they tweak them there. They see which language is going to pass muster in certain places, and then they run with it, and they propagate that kind of far-right legislation everywhere. right? Now, Erin, I was extremely disappointed by the results of that Wesley Bell Cori Bush race. At the very least, I thought it was going to be much closer. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. It's really disappointing because, some people may not know Cori Bush was a triage nurse and then a Black Lives Matter activist. So a woman after my own heart. And you can go watch some footage of her first campaign in, I think it's on Netflix, the documentary Knock Down the House. It covers AOC, a Nevada candidate, and I think a West Virginia candidate, and then Cori Bush. So you can actually see her talking to her community members. Her campaign and AOC's campaign in 2018, they gave progressives so much hope. I think until some of the more, centrist Biden vibes came along, we really thought that, I don't know, maybe progressivism had become a little more mainstream. But anyway, I think I was hopeful that she would see a resurgence of support. And I know there's a lot of controversy about whether Jasmine Crockett put her thumb on the scale. And I think there were some important conversations about race and the pressure that we put on Black women, like Jasmine Crockett, to determine the outcome of our elections. But there was something else I wanted to mention here. Oh, so I wondered, because I read that Bell, who's a former St. Louis County prosecutor, used Bush's vote against an infrastructure package backed by the Biden administration to cast her as an ineffective legislator unwilling to compromise. And maybe I'll get the chance to talk about this too. This kind of ties back into Sawant in Washington and what the establishment Democrats are doing to activists who are trying to run for office.
Washington was an interesting test case. They've got a top two party independent primary system out there, and it kind of rewards moderates of both parties. To be fair, is that a thing you might like to see here? It would certainly. Maybe not for reward progressives what we'd like to see, but it would at least maybe punish the MAGA extremists.
I don't know. I would have to think more about that. I am still thinking through ranked choice voting. I feel that that's something that we need in Indiana. And this, what's it called again? The top two primary?
Well, you hear it called like a jungle primary in places.
Yeah, I'm still learning about that and thinking through the implications of that.
They do the same thing in California as well. Nate, I wanted to talk about the Kansas gubernatorial race briefly. Governor Laura Kelly, two-term governor out there, a Democrat in a very red state. She's popular. Her candidate did not, or her hand-picked successor, rather, didn't win that primary. The progressive populist Holscher winning based almost entirely on her opposition to data centers. This is becoming a huge issue in state after state after state.
Yeah, it's definitely relevant in Indiana. I mean, it's one of the many reasons that I got into this race. So in Howard County, Kokomo, they annexed 750 acres into the city and rezoned it as industrial without any disclosure of what the project is going to be. So you're already seeing, government overreach there. But I built a house in Western Howard County. I have a well. And because of Kokomo's water consumption, this data center is going to put too much strain on that infrastructure. So they're coming to Western Howard County to pump water and zip it all the way back across like 16 miles. They're talking, because if they were coming out to I live on like literally the edge of Howard County. So it helps unify us on a couple of fronts. One, it shows how they just assume that they're going to get to do whatever they want and they can spend however they need to. Like they justify spending that kind of infrastructure for this data center. Well, what's in it for us? So people get that. In addition to that, the pollution aspect of it, whether even if it's a closed loop, air cooled, whatever, there's noise and light pollution to consider. And I'm running in a rural district, and us country folk, we like it when we can see the stars really well, like that. We value that. We like hearing the birds chirp, and imagine having a home and so people are against it. And I think it's something that we just got to continue to message that we're not against progress, but we certainly need to do our homework before we let one of these behemoths go in.
Yeah. We don't oppose progress, but we support democracy, and we think that the people that live in these places should get a say in what kind of projects are developed in their communities, especially when they have the potential to cause harm. So let's zoom out and look at the big prize on Tuesday night, and that was Michigan, where progressives performed extremely well. Their Sunrise Movement co-founder Will Lawrence won the Democratic primary in the 7th congressional district, and Democratic Socialist Donavan McKinney defeated two-term incumbent Representative Shri Thanadar in the 13th district, likely giving majority Black Detroit an African-American representative again after a brief hiatus. Similar dynamics to the Missouri race there, as Sanders, Tlaib, and other progressives supported McKinney, while Thanadar was backed by establishment figures and loads of Israel lobby money. Thankfully, different results. But the most high-profile race was for the Democratic U.S. Senate nomination, where Dr. Abdul El-Sayed narrowly defeated Congresswoman Haley Stevens in the most expensive Democratic primary ever. El-Sayed centered his campaign on Medicare for All. He literally wrote the book on it, but has also been a fierce critic of unconditional U.S. support for Israel. AIPAC-aligned groups poured more than $30 million into this race on Stevens' behalf, and overall, she outspent El-Sayed 11-1. A contentious, bitter primary risks dividing the party, but Stevens and Mallory McMorrow, the third person in this race, conceded and vowed unity. National party leaders also quickly coalesced behind El-Sayed. The doctor, who does not identify as a democratic socialist, but as a, quote, capitalist who understands how capitalism works and wants stronger monopoly regulation, was attacked as a communist loser in a Truth Social post by President Trump. Now, Erin, in the polls days before the election, they showed Dr. El-Sayed far ahead, but he only wound up winning by a point. Does it matter? And what does this race and some of these other wins in Michigan mean for the larger progressive movement?
Oh my gosh, I have so much to say, so I'm going to try to keep it short. But one of the things that it's important to notice about all three races, McKinney, Lawrence, and El-Sayed, is that these were all very strong candidates. These were all people with a lot of previous experience. Lawrence is a former organizer, at least for a decade or so. He has a podcast that he did, I think, for maybe 2 years called Hegemonicon. It's so good. You can learn all kinds of things about electoral politics and organizing. His Sunrise Movement, very focused on the environment and intervening with climate change. And we tend to, I think of these DSA candidates, these progressive candidates, as radicals that just come out of nowhere and win. But these people really set up deep roots in their communities. Another thing that was really interesting, I thought, is that even though Lawrence belonged to the DSA, he let his membership lapse toward the end of the primary because he said that he wanted to make it clear that he was going to represent the people first and foremost. And I think that is a winning message. People don't care about party as much as they used to. But he also said he did that because he went around talking to people, and he didn't know he was going to be the anti-data center candidate until he talked to his neighbors, and they did not want data centers. And so he made that his platform. And I think that's exactly what we want to see in a candidate.
Yeah, listen to what your constituents want and then do it. How radical, right?
Wow.
Now, Nate, listen. So the Republicans, they're not just calling Abdul a communist; they're calling him a jihadist, a terrorist, a Jew hater, despite his repeated denunciations of anti-Semitism. Can he overcome the rampant Islamophobia and become the country's first Muslim U.S. senator?
I think so. I think in Michigan, I think it just proves that they are in general more comfortable to the left, and I think that's why he was able to get that support. But it also shows if you pay attention to the national media versus if you lived in that market and understood his campaign, you would have two completely different perspectives. But yeah, I hate all the labels. The one thing that Republicans do really well is they do not disrespect their own brand ever. And I think we have to have a completely different message, is that we are the party of taking care of each other. We're the party of community. And I made a comment the other day. If you just say that you're pro women's rights, most people could pretty much put you on the left side of the spectrum. So like, our message is better. We just got to keep, focusing on how we can, bring people together over common issues like big corporations coming into small towns and doing whatever they want because they have all the dough.
And in Abdul's case, the big health insurance companies, those big corporations that are standing between individuals and their doctors and pushing for Medicare for all there. Erin, I think the Democratic primary essentially was the general. I think, we're going to see a big shift toward Democrats in the fall. I don't think this Mike Rogers guy has a chance. The MAGA faithful aren't really fond of him. He was kind of a squish. He kisses Trump's ass now because he has to. But they're gonna. I mean, listen, for all of the smears you saw against Abdul in the primary, they're coming really hot and heavy and nasty at him now. They're using his full name like it's a slur. It's like
they can't even pronounce.
It's not Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. It's Abdul Rahman Mohammed Barack Hussein Obama El-Sayed, right?
Yeah. Yep. And I love the way this is how a primary is supposed to work. This is what's great about a primary is it's bringing all the dirt to the surface. And now Third Way is the fundraising apparatus is announcing its intent to come after Democrats. And I love that that's making the news, because then we get to learn more about Third Way. Third Way, there's a memo that leaked where they advise their candidates to move away from small donors. And that is because Third Way is a corporate entity. And I think the more corporations can expose themselves in our election leading up to the general, the better.
Well, and we're gonna talk about that here in just a second. But I wanted to talk about another race in Michigan that really caught my eye. So I wanted to mention that in their gubernatorial primary, Democratic Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson won the Democratic nomination. She will face Trump-endorsed Republican Congressman John James, who is looking to become the state's first black governor. He faced a nasty primary where his opponent Perry Johnson referred to him as a, quote, DEI candidate. But perhaps my favorite story from Michigan on Tuesday night was this. In the 8th Congressional District Republican primary, Trump-endorsed Amir Hassan lost to a guy named Tom Smith, who had suspended his campaign in mid-July and endorsed the guy who wound up finishing third. Now, this marks the first congressional level loss for a Trump endorsement this cycle, following earlier gubernatorial losses in Iowa and Georgia. But Nate, is this what it looks like? Low information, racist Republican voters going to the booth, seeing Amir Hassan on the ballot and saying, I'm not voting for a guy with that name.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's probably what's going to happen. I mean, and I wanted to take this just because we were talking about the messaging of Republicans and how it's always been hateful, and it's always been about, they're going to be this. I mean, they've hated on the same people for over a decade now. And, in Fishers, was it 2 weekends ago? They had the
last weekend. Yeah.
Was it last weekend? My gosh, the time.
What is time? Yeah.
I know it is. But, we had a group of people that are so ashamed of what their ideas are, they had to hide away in a little tent and talk about they're going to put a 30-year moratorium on immigration. They're blatantly, Christian nationalists, and they know that they have to hide. And I was just really encouraged. I actually know one of the guys that went there, and I saw him yesterday, and I looked at him straight in the eye, and I just said, I want you to know that there are plenty of people who are diametrically opposed to what you are standing for right now, because we all have to pay a price to drag these people along. And the sooner people recognize that this hate does nothing but delay progress and delay the ability for us to get the things that we need, which is a more secure future for our kids, the sooner, and I'm telling you, it's coming, because these MAGA types, they believe on, once they've learned that they've been tricked, they're going to come so hot to the left. And I think that's also what's driving a lot of the Democratic Socialist winners, is that they're saying it like it is. And establishment Dems sometimes get nervous, about people that use that language.
As I see it right now, the center, as it were, largely coalesces around being corporate friendly, and they'll disagree over these culture war issues. I think we can reach those disaffected MAGA folks by reaching through the portal and grabbing them on economic issues.
Yeah. Well, and Erin, I mean, think about the people, from an economic, that are, whether they have a special needs child or they're struggling with substance abuse, and so they get in the system. I mean, there are so many people where the system is failing them and keeping them in poverty. I learned about something the other day, sorry to get off the subject, but do you guys know what constructive possession is in law enforcement? So there's an organization in Kokomo, a guy, he started a nonprofit, but he's trying to basically address young men getting charged as adults, because he was a young man that got charged as adults, spent 11 years in jail. And he's been educating me on the in and out cycle of impoverished people with the criminal justice system. And he told me about this thing called constructive possession. So if we're all at a party and there's a gun or drugs on a table, and none of us say that it's ours, they can charge all of us with constructive possession. And when it comes to a firearm in Indiana, 16-year-olds automatically get charged as an adult. So these are things that are happening right now. These are laws that are on the books, and giving people a voice that have to deal with this, and just we register so many new people to vote. I think that's another thing we got to keep doing, is focusing on talking to the people who are affected and just making sure they're registered and have a way to vote.
Well, I guess it's not so much to like the social issues. I'm very motivated by the social issues. As a social worker, I always have, my finger in the dam of all policy, right? However policy is failing, I'm facing it with my colleagues. But the tent where the hate group met was just a little ways away from my family farm in Thorntown, where I grew up, where I went to high school. And of all the educating, I shouldn't say educating, that sounds condescending, but I mean, trying to talk to people about the issues as I know it, trying to share my perspectives, the way I've tried to inspire my community or that local community to act. I have never seen something as motivating and as uniting as the data centers. I mean, I'm actively seeing Frankfurt residents activating, organizing, agitating against data centers. So I think candidates really need to pay attention to that as a way to bring both the left and the right together in Indiana right now and get away from our corporate donors.
So let's just a couple more primaries this week that I wanted to cover. So Amir Hassan losing in Michigan, as we noted, was the first primary loss for a Trump-endorsed congressional candidate this cycle. we didn't have to wait long for the second. Tennessee held its primaries on Thursday, and Trump-endorsed incumbent Andy Ogles lost his re-election bid to former state agriculture commissioner Charlie Hatcher. Ogles, a Freedom Caucus member, faced controversy over since-deleted anti-gay and anti-Muslim social media posts, and an ongoing ethics inquiry into possible campaign finance violations. And in the state's redrawn 9th district, just recently gerrymandered to break up majority black Memphis, Justin Pearson of the Tennessee 3 won his Democratic primary and will face Trump-backed State Senator Brent Taylor for a seat. Redistricting has made much harder for Democrats to hold. Incumbent Steve Cohen announced he would not run for re-election after state legislators hastily redrew the districts in the wake of the Supreme Court gutting the Voting Rights Act. Yesterday, Hawaii held its primaries. Nothing out of ordinary to report there. Returns came in awfully late. Erin, Andy Ogles, I didn't think too bigoted for Tennessee Republicans was a thing, but apparently it is.
Yeah, I saw the picture of his family and, they're all holding the guns. And for a long time, I think that was enough to get through to people, to get them to support someone. But I think the tariffs have really hit Tennessee and Kentucky pretty hard. I think that the failures of the federal administration have outpaced the propaganda efforts of even, Tennessee Republicans. And I think they're all now reaping what they've sown.
Yeah. But alas, they are going to reap extra seats, it looks like, unless things go really haywire for them. Nate, Justin Pearson, very impressive young man. Tennessee Republicans did what even Indiana Republicans would not do and cracked a majority black district into several pieces. Can he win?
I think so. I mean, I think people. I was stuck on what Erin was saying about how the corporate stuff. Like, if we can just make people realize that this system is about keeping the corporate overlords happy, and as people continue to see that in evidence, like you said, with economic issues, because that's where it matters. When they get hit in the wallet, that's when they start paying attention. So I honestly don't follow Missouri close enough to say I have seen, or Tennessee, but I have seen Justin Pearson, and there's another one, a female or woman, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but they've been united for the last 6 years or however long when he first got into office. And again, people are tired of the fighting. I think we are overestimating the number of people that are really hateful like that. And that messaging, it just doesn't last forever. But just like what we saw, redistricting didn't fly here because it's not how we are. We don't change the rules in the middle of the game. It's not what we do.
Well, and our Republicans were smart enough to know it might backfire, right? And here in Tennessee, it might backfire. Erin.
Yep.
Well, I just think when we ask the question of can they win, I think it very easily leads us into this false idea of electability. I think it's really going to come down to how well Justin Pearson's campaign can reach all the voters in person and effectively canvass. I have not been able to assess his abilities on that, but I know his energy is great. I'm inspired by him, and I think his district is lucky to have him.
Oh, absolutely. But it's an uphill battle now, because instead of representing all of Memphis, that district covers a third of Memphis and then a huge swath of rural Tennessee, much like they were going to do here. They were going to crack Indianapolis in 4. And it would have backfired. It could have backfired. And we're going to see, I think, a lot of what are called dummy manders this fall, where Republicans rigged these districts thinking they're going to win. They're like, listen, instead of one R+20 district, why don't we make 2 R+10 districts? Well, if things shift 12 points, you're out both.
And that's why I think some of us voted against redistricting. I don't think it was out of some kind of sense of moral responsibility. I think some of them are better at math.
Right. Well,
yeah. Like Rod Bray, for example, the current, Indiana Republican state Senate leader, smart guy. Don't agree with him on much anything, but he is smarter than a lot of these MAGA chuds in his caucus. So, let's move on. And Erin sort of brought this up a little bit already, but we've got only a few states left to hold primaries this month, and November's election is now less than 90 days away. And despite all the kumbayas in Michigan after the nasty El-Sayed Stevens primary, the Democratic Party is still a bit of a mess. Paul Rivera, the author of the DNC's 2024 election autopsy, says a chapter titled "What Happened in 2024," questioning Joe Biden's decision to run for re-election and criticizing Democratic strategists who'd become generationally wealthy off politics, was deliberately omitted when the party released its draft report in May. Chairman Ken Martin flatly denies ever receiving the chapter, calling Rivera's account, quote, false. A chapter Martin definitely didn't receive argues the Biden administration's support for Israel's war on Gaza hurt Kamala Harris, particularly in Arab-heavy parts of Michigan, though Rivera admits to not submitting that finding to DNC leadership. And moderate Democrats continue disputing Gaza's electoral significance, citing surveys showing it wasn't a top voter concern nationally. And speaking of moderate Democrats, the group Third Way, as Erin mentioned, this week announced a $15 million ad campaign through 2028 to attack MAGA, to go after complicit Republican so-called moderates? No, to attack their own base, particularly going after Democratic Socialists of America. Third Way President Jonathan Cowan called El-Sayed's Michigan win, quote, deeply troubling, and criticized the now Democratic nominee's DSA dodge, benefiting from progressive organizing energy while avoiding the explicit socialist label. Nate, I find it, quote, deeply troubling that certain members of the Democratic coalition fight progressives harder than they fight Republicans.
And the inverse is true as well. We have got to figure out a way that we zoom out and align on a couple of core values, because ourselves being fractured is why we don't win. And to Erin's point, we have data centers, the way that they've been handled. And then I also think what we're seeing with APAC, especially in some of the far extremes on the right, we can unify under a couple of things. That we want money out of politics. We want term limits. We want less corporate, bowing down to corporate America where they come in and use our natural resources. If we stick to those topics, and it comes down to money. Look, the whole political infrastructure is a huge industry, and in order for that to stay, raising a lot of money has to be a KPI of a great campaign. And until we make the number of hands you've shaken, the number of doors you've knocked, until that becomes the barometer of what makes a great leader, we're going to see these types of things, these types of divisive types of things, because there are people who have a financial interest in keeping money in politics. But I think there are more of us than there are of them. So that's why we got to really focus on being nice to each other to get money out of politics. Let us be the party that leads that charge.
It's not the be-all, end-all, though, right? Like, Erin, if we look at El-Sayed's win in Michigan, he was outspent 11-1. A good message can beat big money.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know what else was going on with his campaign. I was kind of focused on his identity and his personality because I just think he's delightful. But, to Nate's
Girl,
point,
the biceps.
He definitely works out. But his wit's just as sharp and just as stacked too. But to Nate's point, I think that's true, that we are kind of split on the left attacking each other. But I think what we need to pay attention to there is things aren't even. This isn't an even split. One side has much more money, and progressives are fighting a centrist wing that is backed by Silicon Valley, by APAC. And so this is not a fair fight. And what we're trying to do as progressives is bring the centrists, bring the establishment back toward our values. because they've sold out to corporations. So I think it's true that there are some places where we find common ground, like with data centers, but even like with data centers, I mean, the state IDP paid some, or let some dark money corporation or entity do some study about data centers and then decided, okay, we'll be for data centers. And I'm still pissed about that. I still feel betrayed about that. And also, what the hell are they thinking? Like, have they not been to Clinton County and White County and seen how incensed people are about the data centers? So I would love nothing more than for Democrats to do well, than for us to all coalesce behind a candidate. But they're making it really hard to do that.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned money. I mean, it goes back to that. But we've got to have a better message. It's always about the message, and then it does become execution. And as a candidate, a lot falls on the candidate to execute. And I think we need to just look inward at our process, not so much at I don't know. I think there are methods to get there, but keeping focused on a common enemy, which is leadership like Micah Beckwith, the average Hoosier is starting to see that this doesn't smell right. There's stuff up with the IEDC all the time. There were a lot of things. A lot of people don't know about the Braun home upgrade because they were so distracted with the national stuff. We got to remind them that this is happening right in front of our face. The governor's mansion wasn't good enough for him, so he had to spend a couple $100,000 to make his home nice and cozy. What happened to work ethic? What happened to, these guys talk about their hard work ethos, and then we just let this guy work from home.
Listen. What we can't punch the people who have their own private helicopters. I mean, listen, we're all just a break away from having our own private helicopters, right?
Yeah.
Listen, I criticize Democrats out of love. I want to see the party improve and do well, but ours isn't the only party with internal problems. And, Nate, I'll push back a little bit on what you said previously. Republicans do have their own internal infighting. A faction of them, led by Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, and former National Security official Joe Kent, are threatening to break off and form a new America First party. Carlson this week unveiled a 10-point manifesto blending populist themes like rebuilding manufacturing, opening investigations into JFK assassination, 9/11, and ending drug overuse with sharper breaks from Trump, like apologizing for civilian deaths abroad, reversing the Department of War rebrand, and halting aid to Israel over what Carlson called genocide. The White House dismissed the group as an embarrassing collection of mostly whiny turncoats who overestimate their influence, reaffirming Trump as the party's unequivocal leader, and signaling no serious concern from the administration, at least publicly. But Erin, I am worried about what this group is doing, because they're doing what the Nazis did, and they're offering an opportunistic critique of capitalism's overreach, designed to win working class voters, while ultimately maintaining and expanding hierarchies of power.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to be able to accomplish much. I think their poor performance with jobs, I think their poor performance with inflation, again, is right out ahead of them. I am seeing like the communist dog whistle and the socialist dog whistle. I'm seeing those pick up some traction, at least on social media, and that may be one place where they succeed. I know that's taking a page right out of the old, authoritarian textbook, fascist textbook. So that does trouble me, but I think the more we can work locally to point out to our community members just what bad shape we're in, if they're not already noticing it, I think the more impervious we will be.
the socialism, the communism, the scare words, I don't know how resonant that really is at this point. They've been hurling those out for like 100 years now. I mean, there's a great quote about socialism's a scare word they've hurled at every advance the people have made. It's what they call public power. It's what they call farm price supports. It's what they call bank deposit insurance. It's what they call almost anything that helps the people, and that was Harry Truman in 1952 saying that. But listen, the Republicans, like I said, they have their own problems, and I don't know why folks like Carlson and Green and Massey would want to disassociate themselves from the Republican Party. It's not like it's full of a bunch of creeps and weirdos and criminals. Oh, wait. Yeah, it is. And a couple of them are in the news this week. Ohio Republican Representative Max Miller is under fire, accused of domestic abuse allegations by his ex-wife, Emily Moreno. Now, she is the daughter of Ohio U.S. Senator Bernie Moreno, the evil Bernie in the U.S. Senate, for those paying attention. And he's under pressure to resign from folks in his own party, though Mike Johnson is continuing to back him. They need the vote. That is why they can't let him resign. Another House Republican, Chuck Edwards of North Carolina, announced this week that he will not seek re-election, this after a Senate Ethics Committee, a House Ethics Committee found he acted inappropriately towards some of his female interns. The details are particularly creepy there, lavishing them with flowers and gifts and ice cream and planned elaborate trips and texting his personal sentiments to them late at night. And just generally creepy behavior. Nate, what do you think of these guys? And I mean, listen, good to see Edwards leaving, not running for re-election. He's there for now. He's not resigning. Miller's not resigning. I at least remember when there was accusations against Representative Eric Swalwell, a Democrat. His caucus drummed him out of there immediately.
The double standard is just, it's unbelievable. I mean, I go back to Al Franken, even that. And we have always held to Erin's point, like we're always looking to hold our team accountable because what we represent matters to us. We don't want to be associated with things that are anti-good human, right? And these people don't care. They're willing to stick. They're willing to stick with these guys if they feel like they can get through it because they care about power. You mentioned Mike Johnson. You talk about a guy, probably one of the most irritating people for me to look at physically for more than about 10 seconds. And then when he starts talking about this, oh my God, what are we doing? We need real, authentic leaders, and it's coming. People are smarter than people give them credit for. And it's like they are waking up to this. And I think the reason Tucker and all those people jump ship is that they know they're on a sinking ship and they're going to do anything they can to just delay their irrelevancy a little longer because they will ultimately be irrelevant. All the things that they said were wrong. They were wrong about everything. Don't try to make them think that, now they see the light. They'll get a few, but they'll go away eventually.
They're grifters. Grifters are going to grift.
Yeah.
Mike Johnson, by the way, I get big this guy vibes from him, don't you? If for those who are not watching, if you're listening and you remember the old claymation Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer special, Hermie the Elf, Mike Johnson, doppelgangers, have never seen them in the same place at the same time. Could be the same person. I don't know. Let's check in on another Republican, though. Someone who has not been at their job lately, despite his vote being needed, and that is Senator Mitch McConnell, the former Senate Majority Leader. He's been hospitalized, we think, they say, for the last 50-plus days. Well, this week, again, they say, he was discharged from a rehab facility to his home after his June 14th hospitalization, which they say was caused from a fall and caused brief loss of consciousness. Governor Andy Beshear's office has criticized the lack of transparency there, saying McConnell shouldn't have left the American people in the dark for the last 2 months. Listen, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but Erin, I still don't think we've seen sufficient proof of life. I'm not sure McConnell's even alive.
No, and I think he's been listening to James Carville's advice to just play dead. I think he got his party messages switched. But no, I hope, well, one, I'm so disappointed with Beshear for being so limp.
Hardball.
He
gotta
could
play hardball.
Right? I mean, that's their game. Take a page out of their playbook. But also, I want voters to know just how much they spent paying for Mitch McConnell's health care if he does come back. I really want to focus on that and what great health care he got, that he could be near death's door and recover if he does. So either way, I think this could be a great thing for Democrats.
Any other American who doesn't enjoy that sweet congressional health care would be bankrupted by a 50-plus day hospital stay.
Better
like
off
Mitch
dead.
McConnell received on our dime. Final bit of Republican news here this week, and I want to bring this home to Indiana. So, State Senator Chris Garton officially announced his bid for Senate President Pro Tem. This is days after Rod Bray, who we mentioned earlier, announced he wouldn't seek another term amid this Trump-driven redistricting fallout. Garton resigned as majority floor leader in June, citing misalignment with Bray's leadership direction. And Garton also named Senator Eric Koch as his pick for majority floor leader if he wins. Koch isn't on the ballot this year and has served in the Senate since 2016 after 14 years in the House. Now, Nate, you're running for the House. The House has their own issues. The Senate, we saw Trump and his chosen candidates knock off 6 incumbents in this May's primary, which I do think gives Democrats an opening in some of those races. I mean, some of these people are really extreme. But speaking of extreme, Chris Garton is a dangerous man, and I think it is dangerous if he were to be named the new leader of the state Senate here in Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know all these guys intimately well. I am learning a lot about the state legislature, especially on the Senate side. But I do know that when it came to, like you said, those people who bucked Trump, who dared to vote against redistricting, it's another talking point about money in politics. You know, Senate District 21 or 22, Kirsten Root, her district, she's running against a guy who, you know, there's all kinds of reports that, you know, millions, but it was in the millions. I mean, mailers every couple of days leading up to the primary. And we just have to keep showing that these people are so disconnected from reality that they think that you're so easily manipulated, that a bunch of cardboard in your mailbox and a bunch of signs are going to earn your support. We need to start messaging, like, where are the ideas? What are their solutions to the problems in Indiana? Like, that's where I always take these conversations, especially when you talk about politicians. Like, I have this unique take that I don't mention the guy I'm running against because I don't want to give him free exposure. He's done nothing to get that on his own other than some yard signs every year. But focus on how that's all money driven. And if you don't kiss the ring, you don't get the money.
Always got to wonder how effective those mailers are if they just get buried on the kitchen table underneath a pile of overdue bills caused by this Republican economy. So I want to spend the last part of our show here in Indiana focusing on the human toll of this Republican economy. And the Indiana Capital Chronicle this week had a 3-part series on the changes to Medicaid in Indiana and how a lot of folks are being disenrolled, where we're losing coverage. in this state. And despite that, FSSA Administrator Mitch Robe is touting that that FISA is returning $310 million to the general fund. Now, this meanwhile, while enrollment fell 23%. Robe's own data shows Healthy Indiana Plan members left the program in 2025. It cost the state an average of $513 per month, compared to $885 a month for those who stayed, and $710 a month for new entrants. So this is evidence that coverage is concentrating around costlier, sicker patients as healthier members get dropped. Now, Indiana ranked third nationally for improper Medicaid expansion enrollments per a Paragon Health Institute report, which Robe cited, though the piece doesn't specify which portion of the enrollment drop reflects genuine ineligibility versus the procedural closures documented from earlier Capitol Chronicle reporting. Now, let's look deeper than inside the numbers. So in June of 2026, 110,000 plus people were due for renewal. Only a little over 20,000 were renewed. 38,000 plus were closed for non-compliance. This is things like missing paperwork or deadlines. And only 7,800 were found actually ineligible. So what's happening is folks are being caught in paperwork hurdles. Folks aren't actually ineligible. They're not getting all their I's crossed, their T's crossed and their I's dotted, and eligible people are being kicked off. A lot of times we're finding that they are winding up back on Medicaid after a lapse in coverage, which has its own downstream effects. Now, and then listen, it only gets worse from there, because starting in 2027 in January, Healthy Indiana Plan enrollees face eligibility redeterminations every 6 months. That is up from annually now, plus new work requirements, up to 80 hours a month of work or training or community engagement or similar activity. And what we're finding here, Nate, is I think they're touting, the Republicans, they talk about, waste, fraud, and abuse, right? We're gonna kick undeserving people that are shouldn't be receiving public benefits off of the rolls. Turns out they're kicking people who are eligible off the rolls, and they're making them jump through extra hoops, and it's harming women, it's harming children, it's harming the disabled, it's harming seniors.
Yeah, crazy to think they've been in power for 20 plus years with nobody checking them with the performance. I was at a presentation this week. We have, in comparison to other states, we are one of the most expensive in terms of procedural costs in Indiana than any other state. I know that there's a lot of legislation to try to fix that, but boy, we make the people that are troubled in our society jump through the most amount of hoops. And it's really frustrating that people don't have a lot of empathy for that. The fact that people have to find out after things happen, they don't get a heads up, they don't get a chance to plan, they don't get a chance, because all of these, theoretically, all of these programs that we have in place are to step people up. But I would wager that the state has, while they whine about fraud and abuse, they keep it the way that it is, with all the overhead and the administrative paperwork and costs that it does to administer these benefits, by making them jump through those hoops, by making them track all the software that they need to make sure that they've done what they said they're going to do to receive their benefits. Like, we've just made it impossible for those people. And I don't think the general public understands that. So again, it's an education issue for me. But healthcare is another one of those unifying things. We all know it's garbage.
The abuse is coming from our elected Republican officials. The fraud is coming from their donors.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and Erin, we see the numbers said what we're happening. We're kicking people off who are healthy, so it's resulting in a sicker more expensive risk pool. We're seeing folks, if they're denied coverage, they wind up in the emergency room. Well, who winds up paying for that in the long run? Eventually, we all do. I don't know if something like a Medicare for all type option is feasible at the state level. States that have tried to explore this sort of thing are finding that it's really not. It takes the massive risk pool of the entire U.S. population to make something like Medicare for all go. But at least at the state level, we should be expanding Medicaid, expanding the Healthy Indiana plan, making it easier for people to get on these things, because it does wind up being cheaper in the long run when you invest in your people.
So if you guys need to take a break, I can carry us the rest of the way, just talking about this, right? As a disability mom, as a person with disabilities myself, and just really entrenched in the disability community, I would actually pull back just a little bit. And I would say, as a therapist, people think that therapy is just, we're going to go sit in a room together and we're going to cry and I'm going to hold your hand while we cry. But therapy, a good majority of it is getting people back to work, helping them work more effectively, helping them concentrate better at work. And so if you want people to work, you want them to have healthcare coverage, right? And just like if we look at behavioral health, if I diagnose you with ADHD and then I refer you to a psychiatrist who gives you a stimulant medication, that stimulant medication is going to help you focus better, which will help you make fewer mistakes at work, which will help your employer get exposed to less risk, right? Fewer lawsuits. This is the true kind of trickle up, the trickle down talking point that we hear that doesn't actually work. I mean, this is a place, healthcare has such a huge impact throughout our entire economy that it's just good practice. It just makes good business sense to make sure people are insured and can access the services that they need. I've seen people getting kicked off with no notice. My own child, I was told, may lose her Medicaid waiver. That is helping us teach her how to be more independent. She has services that will go right into her job. Transport her to her job, that help her learn how to work, hopefully eventually full time, though right now we're not there. And I wish people would stop equating this to, handouts or ableism, and more to, like Nate said, a hand up.
It really is. And again, it's good policy. It's more cost effective. These people claim to be fiscal conservatives, but when you invest in your people, it pays off. Not infinitely more, but depending on the program, 2-to-1, 7-to-1, 10-to-1, down the line. Well, not doing that is fiscally irresponsible. And another good investment in the people is education, right? And that's something else our state representatives have defunded over the last 20 years. And our final story this week, so also from the Indiana Capitol Chronicle, great organization. Y'all should be following them and support them. They are a nonprofit. But the final numbers are in, and 38 Indiana school districts will place property tax referendums on the November ballot this year, seeking roughly a total of $500 million across those 38 districts. That is a record number, though below the 45 to 100 districts advocates had projected under a new law limiting referendums to once every 2 years. Now, most of these aim to maintain existing operating levies rather than expand them, with 17 districts seeking early renewals before their current levy expires and can't be renewed until 2028. Only about 10 districts are pursuing referendums for the first time. Senate Enrolled Act 1 from 2025. The property tax changes are projected to cost Indiana public schools $744 million through 2028. And Erin, I'm no mathematician, but I think $500 million is less than $744 million. So even if every single one of these referendums passes, Indiana's public schools are worse off than they were when Mike Braun took office in 2025.
Yeah, I think your math sounds pretty good. So good job. I don't know if you saw a district in Lowell, Indiana. They tried to pass a referendum back in 2023. So we also have to think, these referenda aren't guaranteed. Some have already failed, but then they couldn't get it done. And the superintendent is now saying that they're going to have to eliminate all extracurricular activities, and then eventually all transportation services if their current referendum does not pass. And this is entirely the fault of Indiana's GOP supermajority. They get away with so much because they pit parents against the schools, and then it causes parents to think it's the school's fault. And trust me, I've been a very open critic against school administrators. They've got a whole lobbying arm down in Indy that can really get on top of things. But after SB 1, they have my full support. Whatever they want to do to get by, I will help them do. But they have defunded the schools so badly that kids with disabilities cannot get paraprofessionals. I mean, getting into an IEP meeting and getting our needs met, getting the spirit of IDEA fulfilled in an IEP meeting was an uphill battle before, and now it's all out trench warfare. I would also say that I've been down at that state house educating legislators for 6 years at least about what's happening in special education. And all they did was turn around and defund it. So even though special education and disabilities is on their official platform, they really don't give a shit beyond a superficial level.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there, Nate. Final word here today.
Well, as a fiscal conservative Democrat, I think it is hilarious how bad these guys are at math. To just piggyback on the investment cost, like you said, in every situation you look at, early investment versus delayed reacting to the problem later is always significantly more expensive. And public education is what made our country great a long time ago. We were able to get people to align that it was a common good, that everybody had the chance to get a quality education. And obviously, like Erin said, it's not perfect everywhere. But how many school teachers do you know that aren't great humans? I've talked to so many teachers, whether it's at community events or other places, and they're just, especially ones that have been teaching for a while, they're exhausted. These guys, and it makes me mad because these guys who don't know anything about education, who don't know anything about what it's like to be a teacher, who don't have the heart for that type of work, make the policies and the procedures that they're expected to follow and to be worried about their job. And they've turned it into a complete, to Erin's point, they've pit nervous parents around teachers who didn't sign up for all that. They signed up to teach, and that's a big enough job in and of itself. But again, people are recognizing this, especially in these rural schools. They notice that the football stadium keeps getting built, but yet teachers keep leaving. Well, again, that's a messaging thing. They've been lied to. They've been told that's the school board. They have not been told that the people at the State House dictate where all that money goes. So not only are they losing this $740 million from SEA 1, add in the annual cost of the voucher program, and you've got over $1 billion a year that we are basically saying we don't need to give that to education. We are not going to invest that into education. It's an intentional choice. Meanwhile, we sit on a $4 billion surplus. These guys do not know how to manage money. And the sooner we let these, especially business owners, understand that they're not on their side. Small business owners, they're not on your side. Mm-hmm. They're on the side of big business. And you are you are an impediment for them to make life on autopilot when they just have one customer to worry about. It's a big one. And we got to vote for change if you agree with any of that.
Well, Nate, perfect place to end it. And you are running for State House in District 38. So how can the folks in your area or anybody else who's watching help deliver that kind of change for Indiana? Where can folks find you online? What's your website? Give folks all the details so they can help you get to the State House, because it sounds like you know what you're doing way more than the people that are currently there.
Well, I've been fortunate to sit across the table from big corporations, and the truth is they're represented by regular people just like you and me. The problems that are in front of us are easily solvable if we turn down the volume and focus on the real root causes of a lot of the things that are going wrong in our state. All of my campaign stuff is under Nate for 38. So natefor38.com, you can find all my information there. That's what my social handle is as well. As far as helping the campaign, sharing the message, because these are 2-year seats, and win or lose, I'm running in 28. So I want to build something that is not reliant on begging for Duke Energy or NIPSCO money. I want it to be built on people who call their neighbors and tell them, hey, vote for Nate, instead of someone spending $100,000 to hope a piece of mail will convince them.
Very good. Thank you, sir. And Erin, where can the folks find you on the interwebs?
So I do a lot of public posting for my Facebook accounts, Moonwalker for the People, and just Erin Moonwalker.
Very good. Thank you very much. And of course, folks can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Send me a DM with feedback or email me at scott@whosleft.us. And we can't do all of this without you. Please support our work with a paid subscription at progressiveindiana.net, and follow the network on most social media sites at the full spelled out name, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Once again, thank you to Erin Moonwalker and Nate Stout for joining us today. Thank you for watching or listening. Donate and volunteer for our candidate here, or your favorite candidate if you can. Like, share, comment, and leave a review for us. Let's keep building a radically democratic Indiana together. Until next time, I am Scott Aaron Rogers, signing off from Bloomington. Love each other, Indiana.